Hi, and welcome to Sage Advice. I'm Rivka Rivera. I'm the Associate Director of Florence Belsky Charitable Foundation and your host for this series. Today we have a very special guest, Bob Lesser. Bob started his career working in New York City government. He studied leadership, management, and conflict resolution at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, founded and led a charter school in the South Bronx, and is currently an executive coach working with tech startups, small businesses, and leaders at large organizations. Bob's also a psychotherapist with training in psychoanalysis, trauma, and energy psychology. He also studied Buddhism and meditation in Vietnam. And his new book, The Peak Performance Formula, Achieving Breakthrough Results in Life and Work, is out now. Please welcome our guest, Bob Lesser. Welcome, Bob. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Now, your new book is titled The Peak Performance Formula, and you describe it as a leadership guide to being your best. Now, how do you define being one's best, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important. It's important to me because I think we live in a culture that is very much focused on performance and on getting results, and we often compare ourselves to others. Often, the results that we're seeking to get can somewhat be out of our control. In other words, we can influence what we do, but we can't always influence the final result. And in the book, I interview Jim Courier, who was a professional tennis player, won a couple of Grand Slam tournaments, was the number one ranked tennis player in the world for some time. And I remember he said something that was very striking, which was, you can play your best and still lose. You can, still lose the match, even though you're playing your best tennis, and you can play not your best and still win. And so while he called it the sort of the external scoreboard, the outside scoreboard is important, we have to measure our kind of wins and losses. There's this sort of internal scoreboard, or this internal set of metrics that we use to sort of say, hey, how am I doing? Am I doing the best that I can do? Am I doing better than I did yesterday? Am I improving? Am I making progress? And so being one's best is really about that, is about making progress, doing better than you did yesterday, trying to achieve your goals and your dreams, and really being clear on what those things are, and not comparing to others, not living according to others' notions of what you should be achieving. And so it's really this sort of, kind of dual definition of performing and doing well on the external metrics, but also having a level of fulfillment. And so, I work with a lot of startup founders who are constantly on the verge of failing. And one of the ways that we help them to manage that fear of failure is to really focus on the things that they can control. And this is the fulfillment part. And I break that down into a couple of components. One is, are you growing? Are you learning? So if you're growing and you're learning, great. Hey, that's important. That means you're going to be getting better. You're going to be developing your skills. Are you making the impact that you want to make, or at least seeking to make an impact? So are you working to make the impact that's important to you? If you're doing that, check, great. Are you developing relationships that are important to you and meaningful to you? And that is, something that, we're relational beings. And so as long as we're forming the types of bonds that are important, meaningful to us, that are going to help us in our future career and in our life down the road, awesome, check. And then the last one is, are we infusing some joy into what it is we're doing? Are we enjoying ourselves? Are we having some fun? If we're doing those things, then we're going to be fulfilled, and we can also, perform and be successful. So that's being your best is really about being successful in those sort of external metrics, performing well, performing to a high standard, and also being fulfilled, and using those sort of, some of those guidelines to help you make sure that you're being fulfilled in whatever endeavor it is that you choose to pursue.
That is awesome. And I truly felt a sense of calm. I think we sort of know that intuitively within ourselves. It's so easy to forget that the moment you wake up, particularly in the face of how all of our social media is set up. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the practice of Instagram scrolling, or perhaps one is on a TikTok. I think a lot of people in business and in life just struggle with, well, I don't want to be black and white about it. I don't want to totally not be on social media because I do want that connection. But then I find it exhausting and just immediately in compare and despair. What are your thoughts on navigating social media while maintaining this idea of
Yeah.
comparing myself?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I'm doing this month, I'm doing a social media fast, and I've found it to be amazing. So I'm not on social media this month. It's also really hard, and I find myself, in moments of mindlessness, grabbing my phone and seeing, well, what's going on. What am I missing? I think this is, I talk about something called the performance paradox in the book, which is that in many ways we are designed to work against ourselves. If you think back to, any, sort of aspirations, big aspirations you've had that maybe you haven't, achieved or realized yet. And I know this is true in my life. When I think of the sort of the things that I have held as goals, aspirations, when I think of why I might not have reached them or why I might be slower to reach them than I would like, it usually doesn't have to do with external circumstances. It usually has to do with me. I'm holding myself back. And I think we're all designed in a way that holds back our best performance and our greatest fulfillment. And this has to do with the fact that we are designed for survival. And what does that mean? So as organisms, the most important imperative is to survive. And this dates back to when we were, cavemen and cavewomen, when, our biggest goal was to make it through the day without, being attacked by the saber-toothed tiger, but without being killed by the saber-toothed tiger. That was like a successful day. And so what does that mean? That means that our alarm systems are on high. We are always scanning the world for threat. We amplify negativity, something called neuroscientists call the negativity bias, where we're looking for the negative more than we're looking for the positive, and those things get amplified. We find safety in numbers, so we're it's who's in our clan, and so there's a lot of desire to belong and to be accepted and to not do anything that's going to get us kicked out of the group. And so that's a lot of this sort of fear of other people's opinions and what do people think of me, and if I do this thing and I'm not successful, I'm going to be sort of looked at poorly. I'm going to be outcast. I'm going to be kicked out of
Literally out of the cave, starving in the cold.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got this real sensitivity to conforming, to making sure that we're looked at, people like us, that we're not taking big risks, that we're conserving energy. So, we're energy conservers, and anything that, we all know from experience, anything that's really worth doing, that's really important to us, is going to require us to push ourselves, to expend some energy, to test ourselves, to, kind of run to our limits. And we're just not designed to do that. And so we really have to kind of work against ourselves and our nature, this sort of survival imperative, in order to really, prosper and do our best. And social media just, I think, plays on, the sort of addictive nature of, the sort of the dopamine, kind of hits that we get from looking at social media, from seeing what other people are doing, from feeling like we're sort of in the in-group, that we're not missing out. And so we have to be really disciplined, and we have to, I think, work to be strategic about how we use social media and how we can stay away from it when it's, really a distraction and getting in the way of our doing the things that are actually more important to us, that are going to, help us be happy and sort of top performance.
Yes, a social media cleanse sounds scary, but like a good idea. Like it could some good, and I've seen that happen. I've seen that trend more and more, and I think that's great when people make that normal.
Yeah. Yeah, I recommend everyone to try it, if not for a month, to try it for a week or 2 weeks. I think you get a lot more free time, so you can put that time to, actually pursuing some of the things that you've been meaning to do that have been, sort of slow going. And you also get to really check in with yourself about, well, what do I think is important? What do I care about? What's important to me? What do I want to be doing? Not, look at, so-and-so and what they're doing, or, where they're going on vacation or where they're spending their time. It's really like, what's important for me. And that goes back to that sort of, that your first question about being your best is a very personal thing. It's about like what are
Yeah.
my goals, what's my vision for myself, and how do I make sure that I am on track to achieve those things. And that is a life of really fulfillment and success, if you ask me, is really achieving the goals that you set for yourself, not that society sets for you or that Instagram sets for you.
Yes. So this leads me to one of my favorite, and I have the book, which we'll link for everyone to be able to get their copy. And I just love how it's accessible and it immediately like you're into action of things that you can do. And there's activities in here, which I just love. Now you talk about peak performance formula and
Yeah.
having these different pillars, and you talk about purpose and vision. And in this conversation we're having about, at least in my journey, I find the more aware I've become, the more I've recognized in my search for defining my purpose and my vision and what I value, realizing, oh, I'm carrying all this baggage from things that are not mine, that are, oh, that was maybe my mom and dad's value and purpose and permission. Maybe, or this is society's value and purpose and permission. And what are your thoughts about searching for an authentic purpose in
Yeah.
life?
Oh, I mean, I think it's so key. It's so important, to your point, I think a lot of we grow up, with this sort of ideas about, oh, be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. We've got these sort of five things that we think we can be.
Well,
That's
I wanted to be all five, so I became an actor.
yeah.
My
Yeah.
solution. I was like, I will play all of them.
Exactly. I'm going to find a way to do all of them. So yeah, so you were creative in finding a way to be able to access all of them. And I think we're not necessarily growing up in a society that's encouraging us to find our own sense of like, who am I? That's the big question, is like, who am I? And based on who am I, what do I want in my life? Those aren't the sort of central questions that we are asked and supported to answer as we're growing up, as we're going through school. I think we all though have that question in us, and we all try and seek out the answers to the extent that we can. So purpose, values, and vision are, in my mind, and after interviewing and studying these sort of high performers who are both successful in what they do, but also have this sort of deep level of fulfillment, seem to all really use these three pillars as the sort of central organizing organizing principles in their life: purpose, values, and vision. And that, I think, helps answer this question for them of who they are. So purpose is, I define as, what is most deeply meaningful to you and how you express that in the world. So what's so meaningful that it almost is your essence. It's almost like just, the essence of who you are, the essence of Rivka. And it's something that we sort of it's just like in our bones. And often it gets formed and cultivated sort of through early important experiences in our lives, whether good experiences or bad experiences. But these sort of things that take on sort of a deeper meaning of importance to us, of like, yeah, this is really where I feel most alive when I am in the center of doing this thing, this kind of thing. And purpose, it's interesting, there's been some studies in the last few years about purpose, and I think we've all been hearing the word purpose more. But some of these studies show, people who have a strong sense of purpose live longer than those who don't. People who have a strong sense of purpose have lower levels of depression and anxiety than those that don't. At work, people who find a strong sense of purpose in their work miss fewer days of work. They go to work more and they're more engaged in work. And so, purpose has all of these sort of all these benefits. The number one benefit for me, though, is that it really helps us to sort of say, this is who I am, and this is kind of a North Star that helps to tell me, like, am I acting on purpose right now, or am I not acting on purpose? So it helps us evaluate actions that we want to take or big decisions in our lives, to make sure that what we're doing is aligned with what's most meaningful to us and how we want to sort of bring that into the world. So that's purpose. I'll stop there if you want to talk more about purpose, but I can also keep
Oh,
going
that's
on.
beautiful. I just made me think about what you just said, this moment that we're living in. we're seeing a giant shift in a lot of people who had recognized during the pandemic, perhaps they were doing work or things in life that were not aligned with their purpose. I'm wondering if you're seeing that shift as well, and your thoughts on this moment in time. Perhaps there are people who also recognize they're not aligned with purpose, but they're still seeking to figure out what their purpose is.
Yeah, I mean, purpose is a kind of it can be a hard thing to really articulate because it sort of goes deeper than that, like, what's your job or what's your title, or it sort of operates at this deeper level than that. So it can be a little bit hard to unearth. And so I do think a lot of people are sort of seeking it, or are kind of sort of fumbling around a little bit with, I have this sense of what is most meaningful to me, but it's hard for me to really name it. And in the book, I have some exercises that help you really come up with a crisp, clear statement of purpose for yourself. But it takes some time, and it takes some iteration. To your question, I think people can often, when they go through a sort of a life-changing experience, can begin to really question, am I doing what really matters to me? And I think, COVID over the last 2 years, has sort of shaken people up in that way, has said, does this job really matter to me? Am I spending my time in ways that matter to me? Because life is short and nothing's promised. And, what am I doing with my life? Am I doing what I really want to be doing, what has real meaning to me? In the book, I interview a guy named Ethan Zohn, who is the winner of Survivor Africa, season 3 of Survivor.
I am a Survivor fan. This is a Survivor household, so yes, let's talk Survivor.
Yeah, so Ethan, won Survivor, and then he used the winnings to start a global nonprofit that, at the time when it started, was working in Africa, using soccer as a way to educate African youth about health issues, especially HIV/AIDS. Ethan then was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, and made his fight against cancer very public. When he was sort of faced with literally life or death, it really activated his purpose around sort of helping others. And so, now he's sort of a big advocate in the health and wellness space, sort of trying to bring like natural, healing to people. And so that was an instance where he was sort of confronted with this sort of like real life or death experience. And then it sort of activates a sense of like, no, now I gotta totally, sort of act on purpose, right? Like, life is too short. And so I think to some extent that's happening, over the last couple of years with COVID and the Great Resignation, or people saying, I got to make sure that I'm spending my time in a way that matters to me. And, this particular job is not it. So I'm going to quit, and I'm going to figure out something else. I'm going to do something else. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, COVID has been a blessing in that it's sort of given people, it's woken people up to, hey, I want to make sure I'm spending my time on purpose.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. And yes, the two other, let's talk about, so if you're working on your purpose, and then there is value.
Yeah, so values are, we've heard about these, in a lot of us who have worked in companies, corporate settings, or the, company values, core values. These are the behaviors that lead us to success in our company, but we can have these for ourselves too. We can have personal core values. These are the beliefs that guide my behaviors in my life that will allow me to be successful in whatever it is I'm doing. And the way I work with values, it's context dependent. So you can have a set of values. I have a set of values for myself as a parent, for example, because those are different. The behaviors that I need to be a successful parent are different than the behaviors I need to, say, be a successful executive coach. And so for whatever endeavor it is that you're, you want to focus on and be successful in, it's really worthwhile to say, what are the behaviors that are going to be the beliefs that guide my behaviors that are going to most guarantee my success? What are the most important beliefs and behaviors that I need to guarantee my success in this particular endeavor? And, you start with a list of 10 things. I need, so, as a parent, I need patience, I need humor, I need flexibility, I need understanding, I need compassion, I need, sleep. That's not a belief, but I do need sleep. I need self-care, and so I list the 10 things out, that are sort of are important. And then we really isolate the top four. What are the four that are most important for me to be successful, that are really going to be the sort of are going to guide me to, in difficult situations, when I need to make tough choices, when maybe I'm not at my best, that I can go back to and I can say, look, it's really important, so patience is one of my top four. It's really important that I be patient right now. I have a 7-year-old that I'm working with. She needs me to be patient, and I need to then take a deep breath and summon all the patience I can to allow her to work through whatever it is she's working through. And so values are kind of they help safeguard us to make sure that we're acting in the right ways that are going to lead to our success and our fulfillment based on our purpose, which is what's most deeply meaningful to us, and that we're expressing it in the world the way we want to be. And then we have vision, last but not least. And vision is really this, I quote Lewis Carroll, the writer, who says, if we don't know where we're going, any road will do.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have a picture, a sort of a well-defined vision of what it is we want, then we're going to just be meandering through life. And so vision is the piece of what do we want our lives to look like, and as clear of a picture we can get about that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's going to make sure that we're lining things up and we're evaluating choices and decisions based on, is that going to help me get closer to my vision, or is it not? Is it going to take me away from my vision? And it's also the foundation for goal setting. So, a lot of people set goals every year. We just had, so we're just in the new year, and a lot of people do New Year's resolutions or goals. And, I really encourage people to start with a vision and then to set more specific goals based on that vision, because it helps to make sure that we are, again, setting sort of these more discrete goals that are in line with where it is we want to be down the road. What do we want our lives to look like? And so, so we've got purpose, values, and vision. If we got those three things working together, then we have a pretty good answer to that question of who am I and what do I want? And then we begin to implement some tools and tactics and strategies to help us then, get there.
That's beautiful and very, very inspiring. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and how you found yourself and your purpose here. It does emanate, there's clearly a purpose to share wisdom and help others reach their full potential. Yeah. Has that always been your purpose, something you aligned with in life? I mean, I know a little about your history in the education system, and you're also, I believe, a psychotherapist. Yeah. And you're an executive coach. All these things do seem to align with what becomes a clear purpose, but I'm just curious how you found yourself on this path.
Yeah, well, so, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of our purpose sort of, begins to formulate in kind of, early life. And, I write about it in the book, but I remember this one experience that I had that kind of crystallized, a lot of my purpose, which was I was in, I don't know, maybe like third grade or something like that. And we had a report to write. I went to public school. I grew up in New York City. I went to good public school, but it was still public school.
Where'd you go?
PS 41, the Greenwich Village School on 11th Street and 6th Avenue. Mm-hmm. And so it was a great school, but still public school. So still, 30 kids in the class, and, teachers sort of, managing a lot under budgeted and, understaffed and, all that stuff. And we had a report to write, and it was a book report. And I chose the book Stuart Little by E.B. White. And I loved it. I was so enthusiastic about it. I love this book. I wrote this 15-page book report. It was only supposed to be like 2 or 3 pages. I wrote this like 15-page book report. I made like this awesome cover on it. I handed it in with such pride and enthusiasm. And I got it back when the reports came back. And the main comment on it was, this was too long. It was over the page limit. And so it just sort of totally deflated me. I was like, here, I put my heart and soul in this thing. I was so enthusiastic. But, this poor teacher who was probably like overwhelmed with having to read, 35, book reports, said, too long. You didn't follow the rules. And so to me, that was this sort of like, I had this enthusiasm and passion for something that was not encouraged or supported. And it was this sort of like potential that got sort of like left on the table. And I had that experience a number of times in my life where I felt like I had more to give, more to offer, and it just wasn't, it wasn't being cultivated. There was no place for it. The adults were too busy. The system was overloaded. There wasn't a good venue that said, hey, Bob, come, like, what's your potential? And let's really make sure that that's being fully developed. And so I think, I developed a kind of an acute sensitivity to that, both in trying to work hard to develop my own potential and find ways to do it myself, but also having that become this sort of sense of purpose of how do I help other people develop and cultivate their potential, their best selves. And so, I founded a school up in the Bronx, New York, a middle school that opened about 10 years ago. I led it for...
They all read Stuart Little.
Yes, they all read Stuart Little. The school has sort of a heavy emphasis on social emotional health and character development, and sort of, really some of these practices that we're talking about purpose and vision, and sort of the tools that help you become a successful person, but also a good person. And I led the school for about 6 or 7 years as its executive director and founder. And it was great, and it was really hard, and I got my butt kicked in a lot of ways. And I dealt with, fatigue and burnout, and kind of hit the wall. Even though I had studied, management and leadership, even though I had some great mentors, professional mentors, but this was really the first time I was in the seat. I was in the hot seat. I was the leader. Everybody was looking to me, to answer the hard questions and to do the real heavy lifting, and do the stuff no one else wanted to do. That all fell on me, and it was tough. I had, a couple of years into it, I had my first child, so I had a baby at home. Was leaving in the morning before she was awake, was coming home at night when she was about to go to sleep. During the weekends, I was working, or I was tired, and had this daughter who had this unlimited energy that I needed to be there for. And so I said, I don't fully have the sort of the tools to deal with all of this. And it was time for me to sort of step away. And so I stepped out of that, and I said, well, what do I want to do now? I had been trained and licensed as a psychotherapist. And I said, I want to do some combination of psychotherapy, but I think there's sort of more. I want to help founders who are going through similar situations, and I want to help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made, and I want to help them sort of maximize their leadership and their outcomes. And so I, moved into the space of executive coaching, working a lot with founders and entrepreneurs. Founders of companies, a lot of tech companies out in Silicon Valley and New York and Canada, and all around, wherever there are big startup ecosystems, and with small business owners, entrepreneurs, really helping them sort of deal with a lot of these sort of the challenges of starting and running your own thing. So it was sort of a direct extension, I think, of my own experience, my own sense of purpose of helping people really maximize their potential. And then as a coach, I got to sort of really study some of these practices that I was just sort of doing by the seat of my pants as a founder, without the sort of time or energy to actually sort of kind of more formally kind of read and learn and work with other founders to kind of learn from their experiences. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. And I wrote this book to make a lot of the work that I do with founders and leaders more accessible to to more people.
That's awesome. It's so beautiful. And I love that little story. Now, I know you also are a Buddhist and you've practiced, and I know you practiced with the late Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm curious. I mean, I can see it and definitely see it in reading the book, but how your perspective on success in your coaching was influenced by that study.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of who I am. When I was in my early 20s and I was, you know, sort of struggling, as I think most people in their early 20s are sort of struggling with, what do I do now? What's life? You
What's
know,
going on?
yeah, what's going on here? The chaos of the world that you're, sort of inheriting.
Yeah.
And not being a student for the first time in your whole life, kind of getting out of college, and I actually had an opportunity in college to travel to Vietnam, actually twice. And when I was in Vietnam, I met a Buddhist nun who was running a restaurant that was would take kids off the street children, and would train them in the restaurant business as waiters, as cooks, as dishwashers. So it employed all former street children. And I was like so interested, along with having delicious food, I was so interested in, I was like, but you're like a Buddhist nun, aren't you supposed to be sort of like off in the monastery, meditating and, sort of out of, just sort of walking around and begging for, for food and alms and stuff. And she said, no, in Vietnam in particular, the form of Buddhism that we practice is, known as engaged Buddhism, and it's a Buddhism that is more out in the world and more active and more participatory than you find Buddhism in a lot of other parts of the world. And a lot of that stemmed from the Vietnam War and Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a leader of that movement. Monks and nuns sort of coming out of the monastery, during the Vietnam War, and saying, look, we don't support North Vietnam, we don't support South Vietnam, we support peace, we support an end to war. And so we're going to organize, and we're going to really be the voice for peace, and we're going to sort of do social work. We're going to help people who are suffering in a more active way. And so that prompted me to want to learn more about that particular style of Buddhism. Engaged Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh's practice. And so a couple of years after I got out of college, I moved to Vietnam and spent close to 2 years there, and studied in a couple of different monasteries, learning Buddhist practice, learning meditation, including Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, the one where he, kind of grew up as a monk before he was eventually exiled and, and left Vietnam and didn't return for many, many, many years. So I learned meditation. I learned, sort of about Buddhist philosophy and practice. And I think, to your question, there are a couple of things. I mean, one is that, I think we as people, we want to be impactful in the world. We want to make a difference. And so it was really important for me to be learning about this form of Buddhism that encouraged that. It wasn't like, hey, in order to be happy or to end your own suffering, you have to go live in a cave and disconnect from the world. It's like, no, there is actually a way to be happy, to be fulfilled, while still being in the world, while still trying to make an impact and working hard and trying to, make big things happen for yourself, and make the world a better place. You can still do that and be fulfilled and be happy. And Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book called Lotus in a Sea of Fire, which he talked about his experiences during the Vietnam War, which is, how do you be this peaceful being in a sea of fire? In current day, it's not war, but it's, what we were talking about before, social media, politics, just unending distractions. That's the sea of fire. And so Buddhism, to me, is a very powerful tool to help us get control of our minds and our emotions, and to not be led or sort of controlled by those things. And so that's sort of how it's informed me and my practice and my work with my clients, is some really useful tools to control our minds, which are, again, I talked about the performance paradox. Our minds are inherently distractible, right? In Buddhism, this notion of the monkey mind swinging from branch to branch. Our minds jump around and are easily distracted. And so things like social media take advantage of that. And it can be very hard to focus and to get anything done. And so Buddhism, and in particular mindfulness and meditation, help us to cultivate the muscle of focus and attention, which is, I think, really important right now. If you're having trouble focusing, any of the listeners out there having trouble focusing or paying attention for periods of time. I work with clients who say, I can't read anymore because my attention span is so short. So being able to cultivate a greater level of focus and attention is really important, and meditation can help us do that. It can also help us be less reactive, and this is sort of on an emotional level, where our emotions really take over, whether it's impulsive eating, or quick to anger, or quick to depression and anxiety. It's this reactivity that really has taken over and sort of eclipsed our ability to just observe without reacting. And so meditation can help us to strengthen this muscle of observation without reacting. Oh, this is happening right now. I don't have to react to it. I can choose to react to it, but I don't have to react to it. So it makes us much stronger. It makes us able to choose more of, do I want to react to this, or how do I want to react to this, as opposed to just that impulsive reaction that, quite frankly, is really dangerous when, we have something that we want to accomplish, or we have relationships we want to keep intact or have be a certain way. If we're pulled by our emotions, it's not going to go very well. And so I think, meditation can really help us to stay focused, pay attention to what we want to pay attention to, block out distraction, and also not to be so reactive, and to make choices about, yes, I choose to react to this. I choose right now to pick up my phone and check Instagram because there's something on it that I want to see, versus this mindless, I just need to get the hit of dopamine, and, I have really no control over myself. So that's how I sort of use it. I think meditation is in my mind one of the sort of top 5 practice in terms of sort of health, wellness, and performance. It's one of the, there's the higher order things around sleep and exercise, and diet, and things like that I think are, I would rate sort of as more sort of fundamental, but meditation's up there as, I think, one of the top practices you can do to improve your health, well-being, and performance.
That's so inspiring. Well, this has been such a lovely conversation. I'm so glad we got to talk a little bit, and I think everyone should pick up this book. It's just been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on Sage Advice.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I did want to mention one thing, because I know it was something that you and I had talked about. For those people that may be out there sort of contemplating career changing, because I know, again, the Great Resignation that's happening a lot, there are a couple of things that I would suggest. One that we talked about was a little bit of clarification of your own purpose, values, and vision, and sort of doing a little bit of a deep dive, a little bit of a sort of introspection to say, what's most, sort of personally meaningful to me, and how do I want to express that, live that in the world. And then a little clarification of your values. What are in the workplace? What are the values or behaviors that are most important to me? Where am I going to really thrive? And then on the flip side of that is looking at potential places that you might be considering working, to see what is their culture. What do they articulate as their culture? Do they have a purpose statement? Do they have a set of core values? What are those? And then talking to people who actually, work there, to say, what's the actual culture like here? and to sort of, determine, is this a culture fit? Is this a place I'm going to be happy? Is this a place that is aligned with my values? Is this a place where I can feel like I'm being on purpose? Is the work that I'm doing going to feel purposeful to me? So it's really sort of lining up your own set of purpose and values and vision with the organization that you're considering joining, with their statement of purpose, values, and vision, and saying, like, is this a match here? If it's not a match, then, again, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startup founders. These are folks who said, what I want is not out there, does not exist. I want to do it myself. Now you have to have, a certain kind of mentality and a certain sort of stomach for ambiguity and risk to do it. But, that is also an option, is like, hey, start your own thing. If you're not finding it out there, and you have a sense of like wanting to bring something into the world, it can be an amazing journey being a startup founder or an entrepreneur. And so I'd encourage people to do that. And, if anyone is on their journey and, wants to, get some support or, ask, some questions, they can feel free to reach out to me. I'm on social media, Bob Lesser, and my website, boblesser.com.
Awesome.
Reach out, and I'm happy to
Yeah,
help.
we will link all of that information so that people can buy the book, reach out to you. Thank you so much. That's such incredible wisdom. There was so much in that conversation, and we're really grateful to you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.